So over on the JP version of the game, we have this scaling raid up with all the different non-limited female servants going on raid up alongside Bizette because, it's Valentine's Day and this is pretty much what they do every single year. And what I wanted to do originally was find one of the 3 servants that I haven't really gotten the chance to talk about and make a video on them and kind of just talk about why they're actually good. But then, with other events hitting the NA version of the game, it just didn't really allow for that to happen. Like, I really wanted to do a video on Vitra, but her time is coming past. But Artoria is actually going to be going up on Raid Up, I believe the day this video goes up. She is either on Raid Up right now or is going on Raid Up later today. It should be one of the two. And I wanted to make a video on her because usually when I talk about Artoria, whether it be on stream or on Discord or something, I have nothing but really high praises for her, but I don't really see anybody else really using Artoria or really talking about her all that much, and I don't know what it is. I just don't know if there's nobody actually telling people that this servant is legitimately good, like here on YouTube, or maybe people think because she was pretty much like the first servant that ever came out, and because she's also Artoria, and that's pretty much as like basic as it actually gets, is base form Artoria. Maybe that's what people are like, oh, there's no way she can be good, but she's actually exceptionally good. She's insanely strong, and is definitely a servant that you would love to have in your Chaldea for just how hard she hits, especially in this Buster meta with Koyanskaya. So I'm going to use this as an excuse to talk about Artoria in today's video, and maybe, just maybe, somebody will get something out of it, or maybe someone will level up their Artoria that's been sitting in their box, because she is one of those just basic servants that a lot of people do have, right? Because she's on every banner. When it comes to being on like the free-to-play tickets and everything, she's on all of those. Like, she's a very accessible servant. She's just in everything. And if you aren't using your Artoria, I mean, I don't know what you're doing. She's an insanely good servant. Now, before we get into the video, if you have not already, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel as it helps me out more than you know. We're still on that road to 100K, and all the support is greatly appreciated. If you want to further show your support for the channel in a free way, I'm affiliated with Loot Cakes and LD Emulator, which are both linked down in the description down below. Since we're actually talking about JP, I mean, if you don't have a JP account, LD Emulator is a good way to play FGO on an emulator on your PC. And I don't know, maybe you're one of those people that's a huge Artoria simp, and you're going to be summoning for her as soon as you hop on the JP version of the game. Although, I don't advise that you do that because, again, she is free. If you really like Artoria like that, you can just pick her with your free 5-star ticket. Again, don't really advise that you do that if you're starting a JP account, but I kind of get it if she's like your favorite servant or something. Definitely will tell people to go for their favorite servant over a meta servant, 9 times out of 10. And then I've talked about loot cakes in the past, but basically, I have an alliance over there, so anytime anyone in the alliance spends money on FGO, we all get points back for that, and we can use those points to get like gift cards and stuff. So it's just kind of a way to get a little bit back from your purchases on FGO. Then finally, I stream every weekday over on Twitch, and if you click that join button to become a channel member, you can gain access to channel member exclusive content. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into this, starting off with Artoria's hits. And man, if you look at these hits, somehow the arts cards kind of save her deck, but there's really not a lot worth a note going on here. I mean, you have a 2-hit quick card with 10% star gen. I guess that's not the worst thing on the planet because she has a passive 8% quick buff, but if you are clicking Artoria's quick card, I have no idea what you're trying to do with that. I don't know what possessed you to try to accomplish anything by doing that, but pop off, I guess. She has 1 hit on both of the Buster cards, which means, they're really not doing anything. They're not going to be dropping stars. You can't even use them for, like, NP refund gimmicks. 3-hit extra attack means Brave Chains aren't looking all that crazy with the extra attack at the anchor, which is kind of a shame because her NP gain is actually really high at 0.86%, and that kind of saves her arts cards because even though she only has 2 hits on them, they did at least give her double arts cards, and if you crit with that 0.86% NP gain, you can actually refund a pretty decent amount of your NP back. So if her hits are looking this bad, because she's obviously like one of the first servants who have ever came out in the game, if not just the first servant that ever came out, why do I sing the praises of this servant? Well, we have to get into the skills and the NP to really discern that. And let's just go ahead and get skill 1 out of the way, because skill 1 I think is the one that they still just need to go ahead and buff, because it's still an out-of-date charisma. Now, it's not the worst out-of-date charisma, because it's at least an 18% attack buff to the entire party for 3 turns, on a 5-turn cooldown, but the standard for charismas now is that it's a 20% attack buff for the entire party on a 3-turn buff, and then it usually comes with some secondary effect, whether it be charging NP, dropping stars, giving crit damage, NP damage, or it's on a more niche skill like say Sanzo's Taunt that also doubles as a charisma. Honestly, all they really got to do with this one is just slap some crit damage on it and call it a day, and that would pretty much synergize perfectly with Artoria's kit. But it's really skill 2 and skill 3 that really make this servant. So moving over to skill 2, this is actually where Artoria kind of became a little bit crazy, because this is giving her a 50% Buster mana burst for 1 turn, a 30% NP damage buff for 1 turn, and it changes all of her cards into Buster cards for that turn, all on a 5-turn cooldown. So essentially what this is it's a high damage steroid for Artoria, because what you gotta remember is that different buff types in FGO multiply into each other. They are not additive, they are multiplicative. And so you have these large 50% Buster mana burst, a sizable 30% NP damage buff, plus the 18% charisma. Those are all multiplying into each other, and it makes her hit insanely hard. The only flaw here is that, again, you can only do this once every 4 turns, but if you look at Artoria's damage, I mean, there's like no one even close when it comes to AoE sabers. I mean, she just knocks them all out of the park. The only people that supersede what Artoria is able to do are people that have distinct damage mods. People like Shiro Muramasa, Mordred, Siegfried with his damage mod, people like that. And even then, some of those people like Muramasa aren't that much farther ahead of Artoria, right? Or when Ibuki has her undead buff, like a lot of those other characters, Artoria is pretty close behind them. This is why Artoria is in a lot of like 2-turn farming strategies and stuff along those lines, because she can hit really hard for 1 turn, so all she really has to do is clear the first wave, and then you just let her just slam dunk the next wave. And it makes her really strong for that, and then especially with someone like Koyenskaya, who can kind of patch up her turn 1 and turn 2 damage, because without this massive damage steroid, her damage is not nearly as good. It then just kind of patches up some of the little holes that Artoria does have in her farming strategy. So this is a phenomenal skill. It makes Artoria insane when it comes to 1-turn damage. And then when you look at her 3rd skill, this just kind of completes her kit by giving her an additional 30% battery and dropping 15 stars, again on a 5-turn cooldown. This is actually why you can use Artoria in the first place along people like Koyenskaya, because this 30% battery, and I kind of need to go into her NP to kind of talk about why this is actually good. This 30% battery actually synergizes really well with the Append skill being 20%, but also her own NP giving her 20% refund at bare minimum to 35% refund at overcharge level 3, which, as I've talked about in the past, with people like Himiko and Morgan running around being pseudo Buster supports, they're kind of building this side niche for the Buster meta, where not only can they now farm and loop with Buster servants, but now they're also kind of leaning into this overcharge meta where Buster supports are not able to consistently get higher levels of overcharge for their servants, and it's making their team compositions much stronger. Aside from that, her NP is just kind of a big beat stick, and overall, Artoria is not doing anything super special, but she's kind of like the quintessential, like, what it means to be a Buster servant, right? Because she hits really hard, she has pretty decent cooldowns, she's got a couple different ways to get her battery. She can drop her own stars, numerous different attack buffs, and does really well when she's properly supported. I mean, Koyenskaya is basically everything she could have ever wanted and more, and it just makes her a very strong servant. Now, am I saying Artoria is a must-summon servant and you have to go get her right now? No, that's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that Artoria is way better than people give her credit for. Because again, she's kind of viewed as like this vanilla basic servant that's not very good. And while I agree with her being very vanilla and basic, that does not make her bad. Because again, I use this example a few times, but it's like if you had a servant that, let's just say, had a consistent 50% Buster mana burst for 3 turns, or you had servant number 2 that got a 10% Buster buff every time they were hit, it's like, okay, technically that servant could get up to like a 90% Buster buff if they were getting consistently hit like 3 times every turn. but you're probably not going to use that servant unless you're trying to have fun. If you want to just have a good consistent style of gameplay, you're going to go with servant number 1, and that's kind of what Artoria represents. Sure, she's shy of like 1 buff, and I'm sure they'll buff her charisma eventually because it is Artoria. They're not just going to leave her hanging out to dry. They'll probably rebuff her NP as well, because even though the refund mechanic on a Buster NP is really strong, not having anything else on the skill kind of makes it seem a little lackluster. But all I'm really trying to do with this video is that I was like, what are the 3 servants that are out on raid up today? It was like Anastasia, Artoria, and somebody else that I just couldn't care about. I'm sure that's going to make somebody upset because they're going to be like, that last servant was my favorite person, but I didn't care. I wanted to do the video on Artoria because she's not a servant that really gets a whole lot of love, which is really weird because she's really popular. I mean, she's a part of the Fate Big 3, you know, it's like Artoria, Sakura, and Rin. That's kind of like the 3 wifey girls for Fate, right? That's why we have pseudo-servants that now look like all 3 of them, and it's why we have like 500 billion different Saber faces, and it's like, why is the original Saber face not getting any love? So that's the whole point of this video, is just to say Artoria is probably way better than you thought she is. If you have Artoria, go ahead and level her up, especially if you're on the JP version and you have access to her second skill. Take her for a spin and just nuke people with Excalibur. It's really fun, especially if you can kind of support her with people even like Waver and like a friend Koyanskaya if you don't have your own Koyanskaya like myself. With all that being said though, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm very curious to see what you guys think about this. I might start doing this more as well, just kind of sporadically. Like maybe even if a servant's not on raid up, I might just go ahead and cover them if I just feel like we're in kind of a down period and they just need some love, right? So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace. Late, guys.